this episode of the Towncast, we meet up with North Jersey guy. He's an author. He's written several books, and he just put out a new book called Me and George. His name is Jon D'Amore. Jon D'Amore. He wrote Me and George. It just came out, and we have a very special reading that's coming up on June 2nd. Friends of the Hawthorne Library put together this Zoom reading, and it's only going to be about a half hour, 40 minutes. He's going to read excerpts from the book, a little Q&A. And also, we're going to have a book signing coming up, so stay tuned for that. We don't have the dates figured out yet, but it is going to be coming up. We're going to firm that up, so keep an eye out on the Towncast website and wherever you get your podcast, and we'll be announcing it. So, yeah, make sure that you can either attend it, you can attend the Zoom call at the library and hang out with other people that are interested, or you could just do it from the comfort of your own home. All right, enjoy the episode, everybody. All right, everybody, here we are. I'm so excited to have our next guest on. He's written a bunch of books. I'm going to let him talk about all of his books. The one that came out now, Me and George, really excited. We've got a very special reading coming up. So we're going to share all that information when we bring him on. So Jon D'Amore, I'm going to say it in Italian. It's Jon D'Amore, which you guys that don't know what Italian means, John of Love. So Jon, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on, Flavio. It's always wonderful when I get to do any kind of interview, TV, podcast, anything for all the people in New Jersey, because as you can hear from my voice, that's where I'm from.
Sure. And I know you spent a little bit of time. I know you didn't grow up. Where did you grow up? Tell me a little bit about your background.
I did the first 12 years in Union City. I was born, as most people in Union City, Jersey City area. I was born in Margaret Haig Hospital, which for those of you in Hudson County, you'll go, oh yeah, I was born there too. And then at 12, we moved to the country. We moved to Secaucus, which at the time was the country.
People live in Secaucus?
Yes, they did then, and they certainly, and a lot more of them do now.
Yeah, that's true.
But of course, when I lived in Secaucus, there were no shopping centers other than the Acme Plaza that was in the center of town. There were no tall buildings, no high rises, no hospitals on the river, nothing like that. For fun, when you think about it, for fun, what we used to do is go under the old Route 3 bridge and jump into the Hackensack River and go swimming. Certainly, you're not. Who knows? We shouldn't have done it then. I don't think I would ever do it now.
Right, but nothing happened to you. You were okay.
Yeah. Yeah, well, but then, think about it. Back then, we also used to get on our little Stingray bikes and ride behind the mosquito spray truck. And here we are. So, so either I'm very lucky or I don't know, but maybe long-term effects will hit me right after I get off this call. So, so that's that.
Well, I know I really appreciate it. I know there's the Friends of the Hawthorne Library put this reading together that's coming up. It's going to be on June 2nd. And I'm going to put the link to the Zoom, because it is a Zoom call. I'm going to put the link on the bottom of this video. So make sure you guys take a look at it on YouTube. And for those of you that are listening to the podcast, I'm going to have it in the description so you have all the Zoom information.
Great, thanks. Just don't forget that password, that very difficult password, 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's a tough one. Yeah, so you might have to write this down, guys. So, all right, so you grew up in Jersey. How did you get involved in writing? Like, what was your inspiration?
Inspiration is an interesting word. You know, growing up as a kid in Union City, literally within viewing distance of the Empire State Building, you know, uh, it we were a stone's throw away from
You could
Manhattan,
see
the
it. Yeah.
greatest city of in the world. I mean, entertainment took place there. Certainly everything from theater to concerts, and I'm talking about it, not real concerts yet, but just, hey, you had Palisades Amusement Park that used to have
Yeah.
great concerts, and again, that was only a bus ride up Bergen Line Avenue
Yeah.
to get to Palisades Amusement Park. So I would say the interesting thing that started me on this was in 1963. I was just short because it was July and my birthday would have been in August. So I was just short of 10 years old. And my father, who didn't finish high school, he also him and my mom both grew up. She was in Weehawken. She was in Hoboken and he was in Union City where they grew up. Uh, my father loved American history. You know, he did his time in World War II, like a lot of them did, and he just loved American history. So when I reached the age of being able to understand or appreciate such things, you know, say about 6, 7, 8 years old, he would start to, during his 2 week summer vacation, in July, he would take us to these great forts and Valley Forge. And you got to remember, too, I mean, even now in New Jersey, there are those signs all over about, you know, George Washington's retreat or, you know, battlegrounds of the
Oh
Battle
yeah.
of Monmouth and Morristown and stuff like that. So I always was interested in the American Revolution, but certainly the Civil War. And so in 1963, he packed up the car and took me and my mom to Gettysburg, which was the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. So, of
Wow.
course, Gettysburg made a big event out of it at that time.
Sure.
So here I was in Gettysburg for, you know, a week maybe, and just going around and seeing where these battles took place. And they had museums, and I was interested. I was just blatantly interested. And so, what started me on writing, at least that got me interested in writing, was, you know, in September when you go back to school. Now I'm 10 years old and it's fifth grade. And what's the first thing the teacher asks you? What's your first homework assignment in school? Go
Write what
ahead.
you did over the summer.
That's right. I mean, there's no other thing to say. Write what you did over your summer vacation. So the average kid would write, you know, we went down the Jersey Shore, or we went out to Long Island, or we went to Coney Island, or we went to visit my aunt in Florida, or something like that. I didn't want to write that. I didn't want to write, I went to Gettysburg. So what I did was, and I'm sure you remember those old black and white composition books,
Oh yeah.
the
Still have
lined
them.
composition books with that black and white front on it. I wrote about, I would say maybe, and of course, in 10-year-old handwriting, I wrote like a 12 or 15-page story about a 9-year-old kid who lived in Gettysburg and got to watch the battles. And I detailed all the information that I had learned during that trip there. And
Was
of
it
course,
based on real? Was it based on a real 9-year-old or just a
no, not at all. Not at
nice?
all. You know, they did talk about how people lived in literally right around the
Yeah.
battlefield. You know, and I mean, it was their farms. and stuff. And there were lots of stories, and I used it too, about how on one day, a troop of American soldiers stopped at the farm to kill a pig or drink water or treat their wounded. And then, a day later, they'd move away, and then Confederate soldiers came through and did the same thing because there was a battlefield. And what do you say to a guy with a gun? And so, or 30
Well,
guys.
come on in.
Yeah, come on in. And so I wrote that story all based on how a 9-year-old kid saw the battle from the hills, and how, and
wow,
everything.
that's so cool.
Not just the battles, but to a degree, I mean, probably the devastation of it too. And I handed it in to the teacher as part of my assignment. And within a couple of days, she had given it to the principal of I guess at that point I was going to Washington School. And remember that for later, folks, but I was going to Washington School in Union City. And the principal gave it to one of his secretaries, who typed it up on carbon and then used carbon paper. And then, if you recall, they didn't have Xerox machines back then.
No.
They had a thing called a mimeograph machine, and they ran off like 300 copies of my story. And there was whatever the title of the story was, Gettysburg, 1963, something like that, by Jon D'Amore. And it might have come out to be 7 or 8 pages typed, for all I know. And they stapled them on the side, as if it was, a regular spine of a book. And they distributed it to all of the kids in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade in Union City. And literally overnight, I was Jon D'Amore, the writer, and I will not lie to you. Certainly the attention from the girls was not something that I despised. I was like, well, this is pretty cool. And so they asked me, because they thought I had some ability, to work on the school newspaper. And I did, and I would write, the baseball team had practice today, or something like that.
Well written.
So-and-so got detention, and I don't even remember what it could be. And I did that for a while, but my heart was really into being a musician. I had been taking guitar lessons since I was about 7.5 years old. And I want you to know, it was at least 3 years before the Beatles hit America. So it wasn't that I was influenced by them. Actually, I was probably more influenced by 2 people. The attention that Elvis Presley had always gotten, though I didn't really dig his music because I found it to be rather simple. But the one who really influenced me to pick up a guitar and play the guitar was Chuck Berry, because it wasn't just that he performed and played a guitar where Elvis held a guitar and didn't really know how to play it. Chuck Berry not just played the guitar, but he wrote a song about a kid named Johnny, who Johnny Be Good. And it was all about a guitar playing kid named Johnny, who someday would grow up to be the leader of a big old band. And that's what did it. But on that night, and this is a fairly common story, on that night that the Beatles played on Ed Sullivan on Sunday, February 9th, 1964, as the majority of us were sitting in front of a small black and white TV screen, and kids were going crazy sitting at home watching them. I was sitting at home going, look at that. That's a D minor 7th. And he's playing a sharp augmented, and wow, look, he's playing a bar chord. I have trouble with bar chords.
Really? So
And
you're watching the technical
I
side.
was watching the musicians play. Granted, I loved the songs, but I was watching the musicians play. And what absolutely knocked me out that night, and I will always remember it, and I obviously have the DVDs now of it. Most people never really consider it, but you could talk to any guitar player and ask them to watch that. And on that first night, George Harrison uh, did the guitar solo for the song called Till There Was You, which was a Broadway show, a Broadway song. Uh, and he did a guitar solo. And just remember, he was only 20 or 21 at the time and was 18 when he recorded that solo. I find most guitar players can't cover that solo today, no matter how long they play. But that's sort of what did it for me. And of course, so once the British invasion started of the Beatles, the Stones, um, all of them, Herman's Hermits, Manfred Mann. I mean, the list is endless. And that's the original, the first, even Petula Clark, people like that. That was the first invasion. The second invasion of like Eric Burdon and the Animals and the Who and those British groups, they came about a year later. But by then I was just hooked. And then of course you had the great American bands at that time. The Beach Boys certainly had a couple of hits before the Beatles ever got here. You had Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, which they weren't the Frankie Valli yet. It was just the Four Seasons.
Yeah.
And these were all Jersey guys. And being Italian and considering the industry or the business that my dad was in, I would often get to go to these clubs during the day to see them do their sound checks. And here I was like 11, 12 years old or 10 years old and seeing them do sound checks and then driving away and hearing Dawn or Ronnie or, you know, Big Girls Don't Cry, hearing all of those songs as we drove away. And I'm saying to myself, wait a minute, I just saw this band doing it. So that was sort of great. And like I said, we had Palisades Amusement Park that had constant bands. And, you know, thanks to Cousin Brucey.
Yeah.
So that's the influence. And so then writing sort of took a back door to my music. If I was going to write words, I thought I was going to be a great songwriter, you know, so I was writing words and writing music, but I was very fortunate because I took lessons so early in life. And you know, my father made me practice. I wasn't one of these kids that played 2 or 3 finger chords. You know, by the time I was 10, 11, 12 years old, I was doing arpeggios. I was doing reverse arpeggios, and half the guys in the bands I was with couldn't even spell arpeggio. But I was brought in. Hold on, you may have to cut this.
You got to take it.
No, this is Luann. This is the woman who actually got me in touch with you. She knows I'm doing an interview on screen with
you. There you go. So give her a shout out, Luann. Thank you so much for putting this together.
Hello, Flavio.
Hey, Luann, how are you?
I'll talk to you later, John.
Okay, I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
So, folks, if you want to thank somebody, that's Luann Roundsville. She is a friend of the Hawthorne Library, and she's the one who's making this reading happening. And she's also the one who made the initial contact for this interview to happen. Though I'm sure there are some other people who actually made it happen too. So anyway, let's get back to this. So because I had this ability to read charts at an early age, when I got to high school, where I was a freshman and sophomore, I was immediately brought into those rock bands that played dances with juniors and seniors. And then as I became a senior, I was brought into bands with guys in their 19, 20 years old, even though I didn't look like they did, because let's just say I'm only 5'7", folks, and everybody else that I know is somewhere around 5'10" to 6 feet. And so, but I loved it, and I played like I said, a lot of dances. And then once I was able to, once I hit 18, I was able to get what's called an ABC card, and that's called an alcohol and beverage control card, so that you could play in bars at that time. And I also joined the musicians union, and I wound up having a very fortunate music career until later on, when it turned out that no matter what band you were in, there was always, the lead singer wanted his name in front of the band, like Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, or
Right.
Tommy James and the Shondells, or Paul Revere and the Raiders featuring Mark Lindsay, and so the singers, once they got a little popular, which we all did, but once the singers got popular, they wanted that stage name up front, and that would usually cause some. I was just happy to be there, but it would cause some kind of problems,
Sure.
and the bands would break up. So then, at some point, I remember, I think it was like 1975, early 75. I had a manager who called me up and said that he had a friend who was a commercial producer in New York City. And the producer called him up and said, I got this guitar player. He's been missing a lot of gigs. I need somebody who could read charts. My manager said, I got just the guy. So I went there. I went to the studio. I brought, my Les Paul, my Stratocaster, and my Ovation acoustic, and so that I'd have everything that I would need, and plugged in, and they put the charts in front of me, and I ran through it once by myself, once with an audio track. And I think like the third or fourth time we cut it, because it was only a commercial. All you needed was about 45 seconds of music, but well-produced music, of course. And it just started from there. I was very fortunate from there. And then somewhere around 1985, I realized I didn't want to be in my 60s or 70s like some guys are, and who are out there still playing in the Midnight Hour and Good Lovin' and Mustang Sally and some Grateful Dead songs, and I certainly know a lot of guys who have those digital recording studios at home right now, saying, yeah, man, 2022 is going to be my year. And I was like, don't you remember around 1973, you said that was going to be your. So, I got out. I had a wonderful run, had some ups and downs during all of that, as many of us did. But that was it. I got out of that. So then I got into the corporate world, which, believe it or not, my years of being on screen, my years of being on stage made it so that in the corporate world, I was able to do things that the guys who had those BAs and those MAs, who were so, wow, I'm not going to curse. So let's just say that these guys thought that, they had it all, until they had to get up and do presentations in front of 700 people, and they couldn't.
Yeah.
And so here I was, with my high school degree and a semester and a half of college that I would take for classes that I liked, and I'd get up on stage and I'd sell those big programs that they couldn't do, and I wound up succeeding very well until about 1999, when I decided I had been wearing a suit and tie for about 14 years at that point. And I realized I didn't want to grow up to be like those guys. So I packed up my car and drove to California, where had already had many friends from the music business and some family, and just set up shop in Hollywood. And it only took about a year and a half, 2 years before I wound up being what's called a script doctor for several of the studios, the bigger studios, and a lot of the production companies.
Really?
And I did that. Had a lot of fun, because a lot of people said that it was because I wrote sort of how I played music. There's timing to the way words should be. You
Sure.
can't just throw a lot of words on there. To me, that's like a guitar player who has this much space but wants to put in that many notes.
Yeah.
You could, if a good guitar player could fill that space with one note if he plays the right note instead of that many notes. So I did the same thing with writing, and in screenwriting, that means a lot. There's the thing about screenplays is unlike a book where you have unlimited amount of pages to tell your story, a screenplay has a maximum of approximately 120 pages. Of course, unless your name is Coppola or Spielberg or Cameron, and then you can write as many
as you want.
But they really just like their screenplays to come in between 90 and about 110 pages. So being able to condense scenes was one of the things in my forte. There you go. So I enjoyed that. And then during that period, I had written this book about something that my family from New Jersey had done in Las Vegas in the mid-70s that I had become a part of, first unwittingly, and then extremely happy to do it since I was 22, 23, 24 years old, and was having the time of my life with my closest cousin, who also happened to be my godfather. And for those of you who are Italian, you will understand what that means. And we were doing this thing out in Las Vegas that I always wanted to write about. And in 1998, when my godfather was told he had a terminal illness, I decided that's it. I could tell my story now, and I started writing it. And even what he read before he passed away, he said this would be a fantastic story, and I did. I wrote it. It's called "The Boss Always Sits in the Back," and I put it aside. I wrote the manuscript, and one thing I could tell you folks, if you decide you want to write a book, don't go to Los Angeles to sell it. They don't sell books in Los Angeles. They sell screenplays. Where do they sell books? In New York. And I didn't drive 3,000 miles across the country and live in palm tree land so that I could come back to New York or New Jersey to try to sell my manuscript. It was at that point I was offered to do my first script doctoring. And after I succeeded at that, things took off for me. So I just worked on that. Around 2011, thanks to a really bad, whoever negotiates the contracts, at least at that point, for the Writers Guild, was terrible. Just remember, it is a guild, it is not a union, so the rules are different, and people in California are not very apt at contract negotiations, at least for writers. When you're negotiating against the Producers Guild, producers wake up negotiating as soon as they wake up in the morning.
They do it for a living.
They talk to themselves, do I want a cup of coffee? I don't know. What's it worth? And so I chose, at some point after that contract, and it wasn't very favorable for those of us who were script doctoring at the time, I pulled out my manuscript, and a lot of friends said, you should self-publish this book. I thought about it, talked to a few people, had them read it. I did a few edits on it, and I self-published the book, and it took off. it took off in ways I would not have imagined. And of course, there were even a few bookstores in New Jersey at that time. And this is 2012, 13, where, if you recall, folks, there was another book that came out that was very popular at that time. And it was called 50 Shades of Grey. And no matter where you turned around, everybody was talking about it and everybody was buying it. If you were a bookstore, you made your year on handling that book. Except for 3 bookstores, 2 in Jersey City and 1 down in Metuchen. My book actually outsold 50 Shades of Grey.
Really?
I was very happy. I was ecstatic, actually. So, I toured the country on that. As crazy as it sounds, I did 3 cross-country national tours on one book over the course of about 3.5 years. And then everybody started saying, when are you going to write a follow-up? Well, I couldn't write a follow-up because those guys were dead. They never did anything as spectacular as what they did from 1975 to 77. So they were either in prison or they were dead. And by that time, I had run my course with those people. And so I really didn't know what I was going to write. So I pulled out one of my screenplays that I had written with somebody else and turned it into a manuscript. Lo and behold, it did the same thing. It just, and it was not in the same genre as The Boss. Well, at that point, I decided, and by now that book was released in 2015. So I realized that I had found my niche. Certainly, it's just one of the wonderful things that I've done, because it's not just for me while I write these books and the feeling that I get from writing them. It's after they come out and people read them, and the things I hear, the things I get phone calls from friends, I get emails from strangers, Facebook. Even today, I can't believe it. Somebody on my Facebook page posted a picture of them with my 4th book that they're reading, and I now have 6 out. So I'm very fortunate, and all 6 books, and this is what's unique about me. I don't say every writer should do this, but this is what's unique about me. No 2 of my books are of the same genre. I'm not like those mystery writers or detective story writers. I don't have recurring characters in them. I don't even tell stories that are remotely similar.
Yeah, I have to point that out, because I love it reading your bio and reading the description of each book. And I'm going to read the titles off real quick. You mentioned The Boss Always Sits in the Back. And guys, listen, if you want to know this kind of cryptic message he was just saying about his days with his godfather, then you got to pick up the book. You really got to read the book. It seems like it was a very personal book, right?
It's a memoir. It's actually a memoir. So, which usually writers don't write a memoir until they're in their 60s or 70s and have experienced, their lives. I got to write about something great that took place in my early to mid 20s and stayed with me until I was in my 40s, until I actually left to go to California.
Yeah, it's great that you were able to put it on paper. He's got Dead. I love the premise of Dead Fellas. Delivery Man, As Long as I Have Lips. He wrote Rub Down, and the new one that's coming out called Me and George.
It is out. It came out in early January. Oh, actually, it came out. Let's see if you could figure this one out. It came out on February 22nd, 2022.
February 22nd.
Besides the fact that the date was 2/22/22.
Yeah, I remember that.
Why else would a book titled Me and George come out on February 22nd? And that just shows you didn't pay attention in history class.
It's George Washington.
George Washington's birthday. That is correct. And that is the George in me and George.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about the book.
Well, that's really interesting. And I see that even though I said I didn't want this to exceed a half hour, we've blown that away. I'll make it quick. Like I said earlier, I had taken some classes in college that weren't really toward a degree. It was classes that I was interested in, non-matriculated classes that I wanted to be knowledgeable about. And since I was at that time 19 or 20 years old and was I needed to sign contracts, a lot of contracts, regardless of if I was with a band or we were recording or I was doing session work, I would need to sign documents. And I got tired of spending, ready for this, folks, $65 an hour on an attorney. Now I would pay $65 to find an attorney for $65 an hour. Right. But anyway, so I would take law classes, contract law, business law, at Bergen Community College at that time. And when I wasn't touring or had time when I wasn't doing session work, which usually took place at night anyway. And I would take these classes, and to drive to Bergen Community College, you would drive and get on Paramus Road, and then you would pass what is called the George Washington Memorial Cemetery. It's literally right by Bergen Community College. And in my own way, I kept saying, what the hell did George Washington ever do in Paramus? No clue. No clue. Why? He's not buried there. So one day I pulled into the cemetery and went up to their office and said, I found like a manager or a supervisor or something. I said, why George Washington? And they said that, you know, after he took another defeat, because George Washington's armies took big defeats.
A lot of them.
And as they were retreating during the 1700s, the latter part of that, you know, during the war years, that area was nothing but woods. It was a forest, and it had a clearing in the middle of it. And so here he was with a handful of 100 soldiers after a battle, many of them wounded, and he needed a place to feed them, take care of the, you know, have his medical people, for whatever they were back then, take care of the wounded. And that's where they stopped and pitched camp. Now, the problem there was that many soldiers passed away. They died there. So he buried them there. And that was the Revolutionary War. Well, during the Civil War, American or Union soldiers wanted to be buried where Washington soldiers had been buried.
Wow.
And then during the Spanish-American War, veterans wanted to be buried there. World War I, veterans wanted to be buried there. And so it then just became, besides military people, it grew into a massive cemetery. So I took that story with me in my head, and growing up in Union City and Secaucus and anywhere in Hudson and Bergen County, like I said, you would see those signs for Washington's retreat or such and such a battle took place here. And it always dawned on me when I was a kid. I went to Washington High School. There's Washington Street in Hoboken. There's 3 Washington townships in New Jersey alone. We have the George Washington Bridge. And I would always remember saying as a kid, I wonder what George Washington would say if he was here today to see all this. So after I had that experience at the cemetery, in the library of Bergen Community College, they had a bank, maybe 5 or 6 of what were called IBM Selectric typewriters. They had a little electric ball in the middle.
Ball that rotated.
Right. And it actually had something where you could backspace and delete your edits and retype over them. It was great. So I bought a ream of paper, and to use these, you needed a quarter. Remember, like the old washing machines, you put a quarter in there and press the thing in and pull it out.
Oh yeah.
With that, you would buy a half hour of time. So I would bring like a roll of $5 worth of quarters and a ream of newspaper, and I started writing this story. And of course, over the years, life took hold, and I would write a chapter here, 2 chapters there, put it away in a drawer. And then as I got into the corporate world, maybe when I was flying around the country, I would bring the pages with me and I'd write some stuff and then go back home and type it into my typewriter. And then computers came along, folks. And I took all of those pages, which may have only been about 4 or 5 chapters, and typed it into what was called a DOS program. Anyway, okay, so then from there, I had to, you couldn't take a DOS file and put it into a new writing program, which was called WordPerfect. So I had to retype everything all over again. But every time I wrote it, I'd make some changes. I'd make it a little better. I'd make it a little longer. And then came Word. And so I was able to flip it over into Word. But by this time now, I was in Hollywood and was writing The Boss Always Sits in the Back. And so me and George was way in the back. I'd take it out from time to time, but also one of the things that would happen over those years, remembering I started writing this story in 1977.
That's when you started writing Me and George?
That was it when I was doing the college thing. Yeah.
And, and that's a good point. That's something to emphasize because, I know a lot of people that whether they're doing artwork or they're writing poetry or they're writing a book or a screenplay or whatever they're writing, if they don't like it, they throw it away. Let it sit there because there's something there. There's something that inspired you to put pen to paper.
Absolutely.
Leave it there and take a look at it down the road because you never know what the inspiration is after all those years, like you're saying now.
Absolutely. So what had happened was, now you got to remember, in the 80s, I didn't play with it much, but in the 90s, when I was in that corporate world environment, I realized that the story I had written, every time the lead character, the me in Me and George, needed to make a phone call, he had to wait until he got home to use his landline and listen to his answering machine, or he would pull over and have to have a quarter in his car so that he could use a payphone. Okay, so that was the 1970s. So then by the 90s, I had to update it so that he had a pager. There were still payphones, there were still house phones. And then, of course, as we got later into the 90s, I had to update it again. Cell phones, but, cell phones with antennas. And, you flip them open. And by this time now, everybody's faxing. So I had to upgrade that. Comes the pandemic. And I had released Rubdown. And I was like, what am I going to write next? I don't really know. I have no idea. I opened up the file for Me and George and said, maybe now's the time. Maybe this is the time to write this story. I had, as with most stories, you start writing and what you think is chapter 1, just like with The Boss, when I started writing The Boss, what I started writing is chapter 1. Today is chapter 5. You need to constantly add that backstory.
Yeah.
And so I wrote this story about a science fiction writer who lives in a high rise in Fort Lee, overlooking the George Washington Bridge. And he just has a series of great events. And he decides, like I have done many times, to drive across the country to California for an awards ceremony. And on his way back, he stops to visit a friend in Philadelphia and gets caught in a terrible thunder and lightning storm. And I'm not going to tell you how, folks, but his car is hit by lightning, and lo and behold, George Washington is sitting in the back seat. And now he's of course, not believing, and just being freaked out by having somebody in the back seat isn't enough when the guy says he's George Washington. In the verbiage and the way they spoke, this takes place in 1789 when this transition happened. And they become best friends. And over the next several days, they develop a friendship that leaves a mark on both of them. But then, unfortunately, George goes back to his time. And now you have a science fiction writer who tries to tell people what really happened, and nobody believes him because he's a storyteller. And that's the gist of me and George. And if anybody's interested, my books are certainly available on my website, where you can get them signed and sent to you. And that website is www.Jon, and Jon is Jon. So it's JONDAMORE. You can go to my website. You'll find the page to buy them. As a matter of fact, you can get all of my books there. And if you buy the combo discount package, they're very cheap. And they do come signed. And people buy them that way a lot, especially they do them as gifts. But I'm not here to sell my books. I'm just here to talk about them. But you can also get them on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com, though you'll pay full price there, and they will not come signed. There you go. There's my little plug.
Yeah, and I tell you guys, I mean, it's a great gift for if you guys like to read. People in your lives that love to read. I know a lot of people always say, I don't know what to read next. What are you reading now? You heard it right from the author's mouth. And you go on jondamore.com, JONDAMORE.com. And like you said, you're not only going to buy the book, but he's going to autograph it for you. So you get.
I'll even personalize it for you too.
Look at that. See, for the listeners, did you hear what he's going to do? Did you hear what he's doing for the listeners, the viewers? He's going to go ahead and personalize it. The reading, once again, is June 2nd. The links are below. And if you guys have any problems, you can contact the Friends of the Hawthorne Library.
I think it's at 8:00. Is that correct? Does it say 8:00 on there?
Is it 8:00? I'm going to look at the flyer right now just to make sure.
And if you choose that you don't want to do it from home on Zoom, you can actually go to the library where they're going to be showing it on a large screen too.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Maybe they'll have coffee and cake or something for you.
It's going to be 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and for you guys on the West Coast, 5 p.m. So you can tune in. You can hear Jon talk a little bit about his book, and you can go on his website and read about the other books. And I love the fact, again, I'm gonna reiterate, I love the fact that each one is a different genre. That you as a creative writer are explore. I feel like when and I'm not putting down writers that write, like the Bourne Identity and all the Bourne books and
right.
Clive, all these guys that write.
I love them. I love the movies.
Yeah. But you being creative are exploring these other genres.
I'll tell you why I did that, Flavio. I'll tell you why I did that. Also, folks, just so you know, the reading will not be as long and tedious as hearing me on this interview. I keep the readings 18 to 20 minutes, followed by about a 10-minute question and answer. So it's only a half hour. But I'll tell you why I do that. Being a trained musician for all those years, I played everything from a screeching guitar through a wah-wah pedal and a large Marshall stack to being able to play an acoustic guitar. And the great bands or the great acts that we've loved over the years, they don't play the same style of music. Oh, every song stays the same. It shouldn't be. A good group or a good musician should have that ability. I mean, let's take it, to even Billy Joel, who can rock with the best of them, and then his next song is Just the Way You Are.
Yeah.
I mean, you could even take it closer. I'm not really hip to a lot of the current acts because I don't give them a lot of credence, which is my fault. But I love real musicians, not electronic musicians. And you could take it up to Van Halen. Now, granted, there was a power rock band, but they also knew how to play some nice soft tunes. But before they went insane and crazy and rocked your brains out for the next song. And that's not just what a good musician should be, but it's what a good author should be too. The good author should be able to, every track should be a different type of song for a musician or a different kind of genre for a musician. Well, it should be the same thing with each book for a writer. That's my opinion. And it works for me.
So guys, again, January 2nd, it's coming up this week.
July 2nd. Don't
June
do January, 2nd. Folks. I'm not going to be there.
No, it's June 2nd. It's June 2nd. It's coming up this week. So June 2nd, jump on Zoom, or like John said, if you guys are local and you don't want to sit in front of the computer, go down to the Hawthorne Library, sit there with a bunch of other fans and watch John do the reading on the book. And if you want to buy the book ahead of time, go online, go to Jon D'Amore, JON.D'Amore.com, pick up a copy of the book. Tell them you want a little personalization in there. You want to send it to a loved one, a friend, a neighbor. It makes a great gift, teacher gift. What better gift to give your child's English?
That's right. There you go. That's right.
Good piece of literary work.
Also, the books are for those of you who no longer read the printed page, but wanted an e-copy of it. It's available on Kindle, Nook, and iPads also.
Beautiful. So, John, I really appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you taking the time. I know we went over, but people are not going to be bored. If I wasn't bored, I don't think people are going to be bored. I know
That's great.
I know you bore yourself.
I do. I've heard me talk quite a bit in the last 10 years, but thank you for this opportunity. And I'm always happy to come back and do it again, especially for the people in Jersey. You'll the longer you know me, you'll see that there pretty much isn't anything I wouldn't do for the libraries in New Jersey, bookstores, but they're in it for a profit. The libraries are doing it because they want to expose books and reading to their membership.
Yeah, and I love that you're doing it at the Hawthorne Library. So I look forward to, on your next trip up to Jersey, make sure you let me know. We'll go out and get a cup of coffee. And everybody's going to see you on June 2nd.
July 2nd.
Is it July 2nd? No, it's June 2nd.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, now you got me all confused. Oh. Look, June 2nd.
Folks, I am really, really sorry. I'm dealing with a lot of dates here.
I know. What do you? I was taking him back to January 2nd.
Yeah, that's okay. But I apologize, folks. Flavio was right. I was wrong. It is June 2nd at 8:00, and I will be doing it for the Hawthorne Library, and the Friends of the Hawthorne Library will be showing it live on screen.
And thank you to Luann, and thank you to Anne-Marie Peterson for putting us together. And John, thank you for your time. All right, don't go away. I'm going to sign off, and then we'll come say goodbye.
You got it.
All right, I hope to see you guys on Zoom on June 2nd. And if you did read the book, I'm sure John would love to hear some nice feedback. Nice, good reviews. If you have any questions, you can always email John. Go to his website, jondamore.com. If you have any questions for us, you can always send it to comments@thetowncast.com. All right, be well, everybody.